Oh, we can hear, but please zoom the screen. Let me see. Is it better now? I hope it's better. All right. I don't want to keep you quite long here. It's just we just want to get straight to the point in terms of approaching the assignment. And I'm sure you've done some work already and you've read the case study. I'm just gonna read through quickly, and I'm sure it's not a very long case study, so we can actually complete it within a short period of time. Right. So in the context of the article below, discuss the minister's position in light of the principles of fairness as they relate to taxation. Right. So SA's work visa reform plans slowed by tax issues. Okay. So South Africa's plan to attract more professionals to its skills-starved economy through the introduction of a so-called nomad visa for remote workers. So-called nomad visa for remote workers has been slowed by the need to amend tax regulations. Okay. The impediment comes after an initial delay when changes to the visa regime is had to be temporarily withdrawn because mandatory public consultation procedures had not been followed. President Cyril Ramaphosa announced his intention to introduce a remote working visa in his 2022 State of the Nation address. There is just a tax-related matter that needs to be addressed in the regulations. The country's Home Affairs Minister said in a response to queries, once that is done, the department will commence with the rollout. So South Africa's, okay, that word, right? It's a complex process that takes so much time. Work permit regime, which means that securing a work permit can take well over a year, has been flagged as a hurdle to economic growth by both the president and the country's main business organization. Sorry. So what this simply means is that the current work permit regime is quite tedious. There's a lot of work. If you apply for a visa today, you might have to wait for over a year or so. If it's permanent residence, the same applies. So as we are going to see in this discussion, we are going to look at some of the advantages and disadvantages of having this nomad visa program. How does it benefit the South African economy? Is it of any benefit, or there's nothing that the economy can expect to benefit from that? So still, a backlog of more than 300,000 applications for all kinds of resident permits have been halved since a new cabinet was announced on June 30 after the formation of a coalition government. So the Home Affairs Ministry initially proposed allowing people employed and paid by companies elsewhere to live in the country for as long as 6 months, a year, without paying tax. Okay, a very important issue here. Without paying tax for as long as they earned at least 1 million annually. So for you to qualify for this program, you need to at least earn 1 million. Then you can be able to live within the country for as long as 6 months, no tax. Okay. So now, let's go back to the question. In the context of the article below, discuss the minister's position in light of the principles of fairness as they relate to taxation. So if you look at this question, we want to analyze the minister's position in light of the principles of fairness as they relate to taxation. So this is where the thrust of this question is on looking at the principles of fairness. So obviously you need to understand what are those principles of fairness. I've managed to consult about 2 textbooks. I think there's this one, Parkin, and there's also Mankiw. And then you can actually expand your reach by, you can expand your sources or your references by looking at online sources and check how to expand on this. But basically, when you're looking at the fairness of a tax, right, there are 2 things that should come to our minds. There is one, the benefit principle, and the ability to pay principle, right? But you find out that in the ability to pay principle, we have vertical equity as well as horizontal equity, right? So we want to analyze this position by the minister, guided by the principles of fairness, right? They say that fairness is just like beauty, right? It lies in the eyes of the beholder, because what might be fair to me might not be fair to the next person, right? So let's get deeper on this, and then if you have any question or you want to contribute, please feel free to do that. That's the essence of this class, right? Just a disclaimer, please note that this class is only meant for to provide guidance and is not in any way a substitute for your own research. So even after this class, you need also to conduct your own research and dig deeper. What I'm going to do is I'm going to provide you with some of the references that you might also look at and read and have a more, what can I say? Okay, a deeper understanding of the principles, and then you try and apply them as they relate to the case study. Right, so before we start our discussion, I think it's very important for us to look at your understanding or our understanding of the digital nomad visa. Or what is it? And then if you understand it, it can help us now to answer the question looking at the text, the principles of fairness, okay, excluding or exempting those on digital nomad visas from taxation or from paying income tax or whatever kind of tax in South Africa. Can we say it's really fair, right? But to do that, we can look through the lens of the benefit principle and the ability to pay principle. Then you can be able to come up with a conclusion with regards to that. So let's start with the first things first. Let's look at the digital nomad visa. What is it? And just for us to familiarize ourselves with the concept, and then we apply. It doesn't really necessarily, okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have this section, in your answer, but just for us to understand, right? So the digital nomad visa seeks to offer foreign workers more opportunities to work in South Africa while avoiding the travails of permanent employment. The visa would apply if the foreign national intends to work remotely in South Africa for a foreign employer or derives a foreign source of income remotely, right? So someone from Brazil would come to South Africa for various reasons, right? One of it, okay, what do you think might motivate someone to come to South Africa or to live in South Africa while they are working remotely? What could be the pull factor or the push factor? Okay, pull factors. Anyone would want to contribute? What do you think can pull someone to come in South Africa and work remotely here instead of just doing the same in your home country or something like that?
Cheaper prices.
Correct. It can be this the cost of living.
Cost of living.
Yes, correct. So if you are working in the US, for example, and you are earning, let's say, it's around 100,000 per year, $100,000 per year, and your company allows you to work remotely from wherever around the world, then it will make sense for you to just travel, and you can see that $1 is equivalent to around 18 rand or so. So with just $1, you can get 18 rand, and then you can actually live a decent life here in South Africa. But what would be the benefit for South Africa to have such kind of an arrangement? How does South Africa benefit from that?
Skilled resource.
Let's have a conversation, or let's open this for discussion, right?
Increase tourism.
I think my volume is low. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can come again.
Increase GDP.
Increase tourism. More
Tourism,
people go to the country.
Let's hear the other factors as well.
Increase GDP, because obviously whoever that will be here
Yeah.
will have to spend on goods
Spend
and
money.
services in South
Yeah.
Africa.
Right. Tourism forms part of GDP as well, right?
What about
So
skills transfer
skills transfer,
or
yes.
scarce skills?
Scarce skills. Okay. There's also an issue of cultural exchange or diversity, right? If you are living in a well-diversified environment, it promotes diversity, it promotes innovation and transfer of skills. You know, we can also talk of what, you mentioned the issue of skills, because we can potentially attract talent from other nations as well by doing so, all right? You can also create a good reputation as a country if you come up with that policy, because it shows that you are moving with the trends, right? So many countries have introduced these kinds of visas to allow people to work remotely. And when you do that, it's good for economy because there's tourism there. People come and visit, and that could be a marketing strategy as well, because if one person comes in South Africa and then they discover what South Africa has to offer from the tourism perspective, right? They can market on your behalf, right, to other people as well who are in their home countries. So there are a lot of benefits that the home host country can actually derive following these kind of visas. All right, let's see what it does. The visa would only apply if the foreign national intends to work remotely in South Africa for a foreign employer, or derives a foreign source of income remotely. To qualify for a digital nomad visa, a foreign national must prove that they earn no less than equivalent of 1 million annually. If this is, if this visa is issued for a period not exceeding 6 months, within 36 months, which is 3 years, right? The foreign national may apply for exemption from the South African Revenue Service. However, if the visa is issued for a period longer than that, within 3 years, the foreign national will be required to register with it. So, right, so this is just for us to have an understanding of what this digital nomad visa is all about. Okay, let me see if there's something. Oh, okay, but there's a question in the chat box. All right, so we have already talked about what do you think could be some of the benefits of this kind of a visa for South Africa. You mentioned potential contribution to GDP, tourism, skills transfer, cultural exchange, global reputation. We can talk of quite a lot of things that we can. Oh, there's a hint. I think it's yeah.
I just wanted to ask you to go back to the section where it says that if the visa is issued for a period not exceeding 6 months, within 36 months, that last paragraph, I'm not quite sure how to interpret that.
However, if the visa is issued for a period longer than 6 months, which means if you have a visa that has been issued, that is valid for, let's say, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, right? Or let's say, let's say 1 year.
Okay.
Right? Within a period of 3 years, right? Then you need to register for tax. Otherwise, if it's less than 6 months, there's no need for you to register for tax.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if I'm interpreting it correctly, but we can discuss.
Because I'm trying to understand, to say, does this mean that if I have a visa, if a person gets a visa, right, let's say for 6 months,
Yeah.
within a 3-year period, they don't need to register with SARS. But if they've got a visa for longer than 6 months within the 36 months period, or 3 years,
Then
then they must register for SARS. Is that correct?
that's exactly what it's saying.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
that's exactly what it means. All right. So now let's go to the thrust of this question, tax fairness. And I'm sure, obviously, if you're answering this question, you might need to define what tax fairness is and provide a source for that. Not sure which source I used here, but tax fairness refers to the idea that individuals and businesses should contribute to society's financial needs in a way that is equitable and just. Right? In other words, tax fairness aims to ensure that everyone pays their fair share of tax. This concept is crucial for maintaining social cohesion, promoting economic growth, and reducing inequality within a society, right? So there are two conflicting principles of fairness that apply to a tax system. And these are the benefit principle as well as the ability to pay principle, right? In explaining tax fairness, whether a tax is fair, remember when we were starting, I said tax fairness or the fairness of a system is like beauty, right? Beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder, right? What one might consider to be beautiful might not be. So the same applies to fairness as well. What one might consider to be fair might not be, might not appear the same to a different person. So, right, let's look at tax fairness in general, and then we break down those principles and try to apply them in you know what happens with tax? Tax has got a burden, right? Tax is a burden on, and it has to lie on someone, right? There's a funny, where is it? Yeah, so here they said Senator Russell once mimicked the public debate on this dish by saying, "Don't tax you, don't tax me, tax that fella behind the tree." So it's like everyone else, every person is trying to run away from taxation, right? But you know, for the government to provide services, to provide goods, we need that tax at least has to fall on someone. So now, looking at this proposition by the minister, say, okay, let's exempt those that are earning over 1 million and on nomad visas. Can we say it's really fair? Right? That's the question. Can we say it's fair or it's unfair? Because for the period that you'll be here in South Africa for those 6 months, right? You will be enjoying the services, right? Good governance or the public goods like roads, police services, national defense, and all that is provided by the government. But when it comes to contribution now, you are excluded. So we are looking at it in that case to say, in that perspective, to say, is it really fair to do something like that? Right. Okay. I just wanted to share with you this so that you can also read this section so that you can understand the principles that applies to how fair a tax system is. Right. So I think I've read that part. Okay, so this concept is crucial for maintaining social cohesion, promoting economic growth. How does it promote economic growth? Right? It is through taxation that government obtains its revenue, and it is through its expenditure, right, that goods and services are provided for the economy, right? Remember, there are goods and services that cannot be provided by the private sector. Imagine a service like police, right? Police services, handing them over to the or national defense, handing it over to a private company. It can be a problem, right? In terms of, because obviously we need to have a way of ensuring that the citizens are paying for such kind of a service. And you'd find out that some people would say, myself, I'm okay. I don't need national defense. I'm fine like what I am, right? There's always that case of free rider problem. People want to enjoy the services, but they don't want to contribute. So the government comes in as the provider of that service by introducing taxation or taxes that would generate revenue to ensure that those services that not be provided by the private sector can be made available. All right, anyway, let me not digress too much, but let's look at the benefit principle and the ability to pay principle, right? Because these are the two principles of fairness, right? Or those principles that apply to understanding of fairness. So the benefit principle suggests that individuals should pay taxes based on the benefits they receive from the government service. And this is according to ManQ page. This is the page. So in this case, foreign digital nomads may utilize South African infrastructure. For example, we look at the security, like telecommunication infrastructure or healthcare services and other public services as well during their stay in South Africa. So while their consumption of these services may be limited compared to permanent residents, right? Of course, because someone is just here for 6 months, allowing them to reside in the country for 6 months annually without any tax contribution risks the violation of this principle, right? Because here we are looking at the benefits against your contribution, right? So which means based on the benefits that you are enjoying within your stay in the country, therefore you should also be contributing. That condition ensures that we are not violating the benefits principle of taxation, right? Even if digital nomads are not permanent residents, they indirectly benefit from public services such as law enforcement, healthcare systems, and stable governance, all of which contribute to the secure environment in which they would reside. Consequently, exempting them from tax contributions could be perceived as unfair to South African taxpayers who fund those services. So we are looking at it from or through the lens of the benefits principle, right? Because the benefit principle is very simple. If you are enjoying the benefits, therefore you should pay taxes based on those benefits that you are enjoying, right? So ManQ again notes that the benefits principle can also be used to argue that wealthy citizens should pay higher taxes than poorer ones. Why? Because the wealth can benefit more from public services, such as police protection from thefts, right? You know, wealthy, in the event of a disaster, not a disaster. Let's say there's a security threat, or there is what can I say? We are noticing an increase in crime rate in South Africa, right? The wealthy people have got much to lose, right? So I believe they benefit more from public services such as police protection. Therefore, it implies that since they are the ones that are benefiting more, the implication is that they also have to contribute more in terms of taxation. So parking at all also indicate that high rates of income tax on I think there's a problem on my statement here. I don't know if I was supposed to put it so this. No, it's not like this. Okay. All right. I just need to. The statement needs to be rewritten or. Okay. Right. So Right, so it's just a continuation. So to say digital nomads with high incomes above 1 million annually can live for up to 6 months without paying tax sounds unfair to a larger extent. This is because during their stay in South Africa, they are utilizing public services and other taxpayers bear the full burden of those services, right? To ensure that those services are provided, the government needs income, and that income comes from taxation. That's one of the income sources. So looking at through that perspective to say, okay, people are enjoying the benefits, but they are not contributing, it can be considered unfair, right? So I've included an article, I think perhaps be digital nomads can transform small island. Also, what was this for? I think I put this for as an argument for, right? To say the minister's position is a good position because I'm sure he's trying to attract these digital nomads so that when they come to South Africa, it is a way to boost what? The economy through expenditure. Because obviously when you're in South Africa, you're a digital nomad, you're earning your income from the US, the EU, for instance, or any other region around the world. And when you come to South Africa, you are spending. Your expenditure contributes towards the growth of the economy. So from that perspective, you can also borrow some ideas from this article where they're saying how digital nomads can transform tourism and the economy of small islands, small island developing states, right? So we can just go through. Of course, you might not read everything, but you just pick what's interesting for you. All right, so here and there, I've tried to embed some links that you can also use to broaden your perspective when it comes to this question, right? But okay, let's look at, because it's very difficult maybe to measure the actual benefits that are enjoyed by the local taxpayers and the digital nomads. What's your thought on, what are your thoughts on the benefits, or who benefits more, the nomads as compared to the local taxpayers? What do you think? Is it something that can be quantified? Just a subjective, a judgmental, right, let's hear from you. What do you think in terms of the nomads compared to the local taxpayers? To the extent that we can exclude them, right? We can just leave them to say, okay, it's fine. Don't pay the tax. Is my question clear, or maybe it's unclear?
It's clear.
There are two things involved. Say that
I
you
would
didn't
say
get the
maybe you
yeah.
could, from a South African perspective, sometimes you could, especially maybe like in recent years, you could argue that it's unfair, or maybe the digital nomads benefit a lot more than a South African would, because as a local citizen, you can't opt out of paying tax. You have to pay tax regardless of your tax bracket. Unlike these guys where you say like, okay, you can stay for 6 months and then you don't have to pay tax for those 6 months, but you have to earn more than R1 million. And also when you look at like we discussed earlier about price parity, they could essentially afford to leave their homes without have to pay a lot more for certain services and come to South Africa and actually pay a lot less for even a lot more than they've gotten back at home. For instance, let's say you live in New York and an apartment is like $10,000, but it's very small. $10,000 in South Africa is a lot of money. You could get a mansion and a half for the same amount of money that you're even paying back at home.
Correct. All right. Thank you so much for bringing that argument. And I think there's another article that I've attached, like I've embedded a link down here. You're going to see it. There's also a debate to say, okay, these guys, as they are working remotely, earning their incomes elsewhere, proponents of the exclusion of these digital nomads in paying taxes, they argue that they want to avoid double taxation, right? To say, okay, from your home country, probably you are contributing to income tax or whatever kind of tax that you are paying abroad or in that country. And then here in South Africa, when you are here, you contribute again in paying taxes, right? So there's another article that talks about that, but I will leave you guys to read it, and then you come up with your own conclusions. But basically, that's what they would say, to say, okay, if you take that person here again, it will be some kind of double taxation. So that's what they say they want to avoid. Right? So so remember, this is a discussion, right? You can bring in maybe arguments against this kind of arguments against this proposition, right? And then maybe you can support why you think the minister is saying that. So that's where maybe the issue to boost the economy through tourism, other consumption expenditures, while they are here in South Africa. Okay, so remember I said this is not like a substitution for your own research. You use this as a foundation, like to now know, oh, so these are some of the things that you are supposed to include in your essay. And remember to write in an essay format rather than a rather than writing bullet points, or presenting bullet points. So let's look at the ability to pay principle. The ability to pay principle emphasizes that those with the greater financial resources should contribute more in taxes. That's the ability to pay. According to Markey, taxes should be levied in accordance with a person's ability to pay. That is how well that person can shoulder the burden or the tax burden, right? Okay. So the proposed tax exemption applies only to remote workers earning above, right? Which means obviously if you're earning below 1 million, you don't even qualify for that visa, right? So to some extent, I see that they're trying to boost the economy through expenditure, right? Remember, if we are going to do these classes, remember economics is broadly classified into microeconomics and macroeconomics, right? So in macroeconomics, you would encounter this equation. Forgive me for I'm using a mouse, right? So we have GDP. GDP is made up of consumption expenditure plus investment expenditure plus government expenditure plus exports minus imports, right? So basically, this is the equation that helps us to model the GDP of an economy. What did I say? Consumption, investment, government expenditure, exports minus imports. Why do we subtract imports? Because when you are importing goods into South Africa, you are spending money outside of South Africa, right? So it's a leakage. But exports are an injection of income into the economy. So promoting exports boosts GDP. The same applies to consumption expenditure. The same applies to investment and government expenditure as well. So these are various tools that the government can use or an economy can use to stimulate growth. Right, but anyway, that's a story for another day. What I was saying is that, right, someone earning 1 million rands annually, can we categorize that person as a high income earner within South Africa or not, based on the tax system here in South Africa? Earning something above 1 million on an annual. Can you consider that to be, can you consider such a person or an individual to fall in the high income bracket? Okay, so that's a question, right? Yes or no?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes, definitely yes.
All right. Yeah. Instead of just saying yes or no, let's have reasons, right? You can justify your answer so that at least we can.
In South African context, you would say yes, they're considered a high earner because the average wage in South Africa is nowhere near that amount of money.
All right. Okay, so perhaps you can try to break down that 1 million into like to just find the monthly income for that particular person. Right? 1 million divided by 12. That could be what? Is it around is it 80 something?
83,000. There about.
80,000 every month, right? Yeah, so that can give us a picture of what kind of a bracket can we
Yeah, they're
classify
above
them?
Top
41.
5 or top 10% of earners in the country, or top 1 even. Somewhere I forgot the stats, but
Right. So that could be considered good for GDP, because obviously the spending patterns of that particular individual might differ from an individual obviously earning something less than that 1 million, right? The spending priorities of an individual earning 1 million and above differs from the spending patterns for those people that are below. So, you know, those are some of the arguments that we can look at in terms of the minister's position to say, okay, what was going through the minister's mind when they come up with that, or when they proposed such conditions, right? All right, anyway. Oh, there was a question. I think, where do we get this document or links that is in the document? I will share this document with you. So don't worry. That one is sorted, right? So, so where were we? Oh, we're here. All right. So, two notions of equity emanates from the principle, from the ability to pay principle. So you have seen that basically when you're talking about the tax fairness, there are basically two principles that we can talk about: the benefit principle and the ability to pay principle. But we can break down the ability to pay principles into two components as well, or notions: the vertical equity and horizontal equity. So based on vertical equity principle, individuals with a greater ability to pay, which is higher income or wealth, should contribute a larger share of taxes, right? That's vertical equity. So, but, okay, instead of saying this raised, you can say this raises this, but this raises the question of how much more tax should the richer pay, right? Of course, we are saying, yes, let's have those that are wealthy paying higher tax, those that are poor paying lower tax, but how low should the low income earners pay? How high should those high income earners pay in terms of taxes? This is the question that we are asking here. So that question now is answered by the various tax regimes. When you're looking at tax regimes, we can have proportional tax regime, we can have regressive tax regime, we can also have progressive tax regime. So the example that I've presented here is just for us to know and understand the principles, right? You might not really necessarily need to put this in your document, right? I'm just doing this so that we can understand the concepts, the principles, then we know how to apply them. So if you look at the first column, we have the quantiles. The quantile, we have the lowest quantile, the second, the middle, the fourth, and the highest. So these are the highest income earners, right? The average income for the lowest quantile is, let's say this is in US dollars. This is 9,880. The highest is 174,000. The tax that is paid as a percent of income. For the lowest quantile, it's on average 8%. For the highest quantile is 29.1%. Right.
Sorry, sir. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Is this an annual number, or these are monthly payments?
It's annual.
Okay.
Yes, it's annual. And then we are looking at the percent of all the income, right? To say, okay, so the lowest quantile, let's say in South Africa, 4% of all the total income in South Africa goes to the lowest quantile, the poor, right? Or the poorest. Then the highest quantile the highest income earners, 49% of all the income goes to these guys. What is the percent of all the taxes? It's 59. Right. So now the question is, can we say this tax is proportional? Is it regressive or it's progressive? Let me define proportionate tax. A proportionate tax is where we have a constant percentage of tax, right? Let's say we just say, sorry for that. Let's say all right. So we're talking about let's say income is 15%. Sorry, tax is 15% of whatever income that you earn. So which means as your income grows, your tax contribution also grows, right? 15% of 100,000, that's 15,000. 15% of, let's say, 200,000, maybe that will be 30,000. So as your income grows, so does your tax burden or your tax contribution or your tax liability, right? But there's also another regime that is known as regressive tax. When a tax system is regressive, it means that as the income grows, the tax or the percentage of tax falls. There are some kind of taxes like that where they want to protect the rich. I don't know. Right? There are various reasons where we can have regressive taxes, right? And then we can have progressive taxes, whereby we don't just have a constant rate like 15% of whatever income that you are earning. No, but you are saying we have different brackets. Say, okay, so from this and this, it's 1%. The second is 7%. The highest income earners is this kind, this magnitude of tax of the tax rate, right? So in South Africa, what kind of a tax system do you think we have? Is it a regressive, progressive, or proportionate?
Progressive,
Right? Why do you say so?
because we're using a tax bracket system
Right.
when it comes to income tax.
Okay, right. So you understand. So why are we doing all this, right? We want to look at the situation that we have at hand through the lens of the ability to pay principal. Okay. Right. Oh, I have already mentioned this. Or to say which of the three, by three I'm referring to this, is fair, right? That's why I would say equity, like beauty, is in the eyes of the beholder. Right. But anyways, let's leave that out. Exempting these high earners from tax obligations while lower income South Africans continue to pay taxes contradicts or violates the principles of vertical equity, where individuals with a greater financial capacity should contribute proportionately more. Right? So we can see that if we look at this through this lens, where we are looking at the vertical equity to say, okay, the higher income that you earn, the more that you should contribute, right? Looking at the exemption by the proposed exemption by the Home Affairs Minister, perhaps it can be a violation of this principle, right? So we are looking at this issue from different perspectives. Right, let's look at horizontal equity principle, which suggests that individuals in similar economic situations should be taxed similarly in the context of South Africa's proposed nomad visa. So here, guys, this is very difficult to implement. Why? Because when you look at different economic situations, You can look at two individuals who are both earning 50K a month. Right? This example in your book, ManQ. Right? And then if you look at economic situations, right? So this is an example of an economic situation. Both they're earning the same. Right. But individual A, let's say they are sick, for instance, and their health bill or medical bill is actually 20 or 30, I don't know. 30,000. While it's we have another individual with 2 kids and their school fees and everything amounts to 20. Right? Can we say these two individuals have the same economic situations?
Nope.
All right. So there's this example, interesting example that you can read here. Right, where they talk about okay. Is it vertical or is horizontal? I'm not sure. Must be vertical. Yeah, it's horizontal. Right, where they says okay, let me just read. I know it will take us time. If taxes are based on ability to pay, then similar taxpayers should pay similar amounts of taxes. But what determines if two taxpayers are similar? Right? Important question. Families differ in so many ways. To evaluate whether a tax code is horizontally equitable, one must determine which differences are relevant for a family's ability to pay and which ones are different. Also, which differences are not. Which differences are relevant for a family's ability to pay and which ones are not. So let's suppose two families here, Smith and Jones, same income 50,000. The Smiths have no children. But Mr. Smith has an illness that causes medical expenses of 20,000. The Jones are in good health, but they have 4 children. 2 of the Jones children are in college, generating tuition bill of 30,000. Will it be fair for the 2 families to pay the same tax because they have the same income? Would it be more fair to give the Smiths a tax break to help them offset their high medical? Okay, well, that's a discussion on another day, but I just wanted you to understand what do we mean by horizontal equity, right? How does it differ from vertical equity, right? Okay. So horizontal equity, we are looking at similar economic conditions, economic situations, or circumstances. All right, so in the context of South Africa's proposed nomad visa, horizontal equity is highly relevant because the policy creates a distinction between two groups of individuals who are in similar economic situations, but are treated differently under the tax system, right? So what does this do? This creates a situation where two individuals with similar incomes, one a local taxpayer and another a nomad visa holder, which are treated differently under the tax system. So let's look at this. We have two individuals. Let's suppose that they have the same economic situation, sorry. Earning, let's say 50,000 a month, or let's say 83,000 rands a month. Like we have seen that 1 million rands a year. Will it be fair to treat these two individuals differently? Just because this one is a local taxpayer or a local worker, local employee, and this one is a nomad visa holder, to exempt the nomad visa holder, while it's the local taxpayer, the local employee is paying, let's say, 28%. Will it be fair? Yes or no? Based on the looking through this lens of the horizontal equity principle. All right, there's silence now in the room.
Please repeat the question.
Oh yeah, I think I suspected that. All right. So I'm saying, remember, horizontal equity suggests that individuals with similar economic situations should be taxed similarly, right? But in this case, now we have a nomad visa holder and
Mm,
a South African, a local local taxpayer, right?
mm.
If we exempt the nomad visa holder from paying tax, whilst subjecting the local South African to keep on paying tax, will we consider that to be equitable or fair when we look at this through this horizontal equity principle?
No, it's not fair
It's not
because
fair.
horizontal states that they are. We look at the similar economic circumstances. So these people, they both facing the same economic challenges or circumstances. So why one will be exempted while they facing the same thing as the other? So it's not fair.
Based on that principle, it's not fair.
Mm.
Right. So the minister's cautious approach may reflect concerns about tax fairness, ensuring that affluent foreign professionals contribute their fair share rather than benefiting disproportionately from public services without financial accountability. By addressing these tax concerns before implementing the visa, the minister aims to uphold the principles of vertical equity and avoid tax policies that might favor the wealth. So now this is maybe some kind of an overall assessment of the situation where now we are saying, remember we said you look at this from a negative side, or you look at this, you come up with arguments against the position of the minister. And then maybe in another case, you might support him based on the idea that we are trying to attract talent, we are trying to bring in professionals, we are trying to bring in tourism, expenditure as well for stimulating the economy through consumption expenditure, all of that. So perhaps we can say the minister's position in terms of delaying this process, or because we are looking at the first position is to say the minister actually said, let me go back so that I don't say things that are coming from my head. Okay. So once this is done, the department will commence with the rollout. So there are some delays in the rolling out of this new in this reform, work visa reform. Why? Because they want to make sure that the tax system that they're going to come up with is going to be perhaps fair. I don't know. And it will not take advantage, or it will not create a situation where some individuals are carrying the largest burden of the tax, while others are just walking freely without any burden. So you need to create a balance in your arguments, and then at last you provide your conclusion, some kind of a summative statement, or not statement but paragraph, that tells us what you think about this, your own view, your own perspective with regard to the minister's position, right? I hope this question is clear. But I think before the conclusion, what you can do is you can actually recommend what you think can be done, right? So you can come up with some potential recommendations to ensure fairness. If, for example, you've noted that the minister's proposition or the minister's suggestion is unfair, or it sounds unfair, what then do you propose to be in place? Of course, the question didn't talk about that, but I think it can be bonus for you if you do that, to say, okay, this is what I suggest should be done. For example, since these guys are just here for 6 months, right? Perhaps during that period, in terms of the benefits that they're going to enjoy, might not be compared with the locals. We can come up with a partial taxation for nomad visa holder. rather than granting full tax exemptions. We can have a partial, right? To just at least pay something rather than to just say full exemption. But remember, policies like this, it's quite difficult because you are always in a dilemma, right? You want to attract talent, you want to promote economic, because there are so many ways through which economic growth can be promoted, it can be, various ways through which development can happen, right? Or economic growth can happen. So this is one way of doing that. If you can attract more and more of this kind of people, you know, some of them might even get interested in buying properties in South Africa, okay, or doing other things or some other investments while it's here in South Africa. Because when you're here, you start seeing opportunities that you can actually explore and utilize. So a partial taxation can be a proposition, it can be one of the recommendations, right? Or maybe adjusting the income threshold, right? I don't know whether up or down, or you can come up with your own recommendation that you think can make this proposed tax system fair or equitable. While it's in doing all this, we need to create a balance between economic growth and equity, because these two variables that we have here, equity and economic growth, the moment we say, okay, let's promote economic growth by bringing in more of these, by attracting them, by exempting them from taxes, right? What will be happening to equity? Equity suffers. The moment you say, okay, let's try now to ensure that it's equitable, that tax system for these nomad visa holders, by how? Okay, how? By maybe introducing those partial taxation systems for them, right? In doing that, you might discourage other people who were actually planning to come to South Africa, and the economic growth part suffers as well. So these are some of the things that you can actually bring in your conclusion, in your summary or whatever. Okay, let's look at this paper. That might help you as well. Right. Some of these paper I didn't read them, but I just downloaded them and I said, perhaps this can be helpful. It's not surprising that you might find this not to be useful for you, but it's fair taxation of digital nomads. You know what distinguishes assignments in terms of getting distinctions and stuff like that? I think it's the extra effort that is seen when someone is marking your assignment. You can see that an assignment that was done just a day before submission and the one that was done maybe, I don't know, 2 weeks or so, it can be seen by just looking at the work. You can see the commitment and everything. So if you consult quite a little bit of some sources additional, apart from the textbooks, I'm sure it shows your, okay, I don't know if this is correct, but your level of seriousness in the assignment. Right, so they're talking about to measure whether digital nomads are fairly taxed, benchmark what, I don't know. Let's see if there's something that you can. All right, I don't know if there's an abstract here. Yeah, there's an abstract. So you can just try to read the abstract and check if there's important information. And obviously you can read this whole article, but maybe chapter 7, what fair taxation is, solutions, citizen-based tax. So these are some of the propositions. Tax credit resident states, I don't know, but you can find maybe one recommendation that you can take from here and plug it in your assignment. Maybe chapter 7 can be helpful, or going to the conclusion and check if there's something that you can find, because there's no way you can read these 59 pages, no ways, but you just take what is important for you. I hope. Right, so lastly, you need to show that you have done your homework. How? Maybe in like consulting additional sources about digital nomads and taxation. Let's see if we can find some digital nomads and taxation. I don't know, I'm just thinking if we can find articles. It's unfortunate. Okay, we can say PDF so that we can get maybe articles. The taxation of digital nomads, the 3Ws, the digital nomads and international. So you can do this to enhance your essay even after you are done, and then you can just ensure that you include more and more references from additional sources. So I've included some sources here. Let's check this. This is question 2, right? So the impact of national minimum wage in South Africa, early quantitative evidence, right? You can read the abstracts, or there's no abstract here, unfortunately. But you can just browse through the introduction and check what they want to achieve. If there are some findings, you can also come here at the bottom and check what did they find, right? So this shows that you've gone an extra mile in, let's check this one, measuring impact of the 2024 national minimum wage increase. What did they, this is the executive summary. Perhaps you can get something, but if not, please don't come after me and say some of the articles that you posted are not applicable, right? It might happen that way. Right, so let's answer this question. Let's check what it says, and then we conclude. I don't know about the length. I think it wasn't mentioned here, but perhaps you have information about how long it should be. So question 2, South Africa faces the triple challenge of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. And the national minimum wage debate has pulled on all 3 threads to make arguments for and against this policy. Discuss the theoretical considerations. Very important to note that. Right, of a minimum wage, and touching on each of the 3 challenges South Africa faces. Discuss some arguments for how this policy may affect them. Discuss some arguments for, right, how this policy may affect them. So this is a discussion, I'm sure. You can look at the arguments. Obviously, the starting point is to look at the national minimum wage itself, the theoretical considerations for it. What does theory say, right? And what are the theoretical implications? Don't worry, I'm going to show you just now. And then you now go on to touch on how this national minimum wage affects what? Poverty, affect inequality, affect unemployment. So a minimum wage is the legal mandated lowest amount of compensation that an employer is required to pay workers for their labor, and usually expressed as an hourly, daily, or monthly wage. Right? If you have a citation for that, you plug it in there. Obviously, this is the definition of a minimum wage. It is set by the government to ensure that employees receive a basic standard of living and to protect low-income workers from exploitation. Low-income workers, for example, agricultural workers, domestic workers, security, the security sector, to mention just a few. And it is set by the government to ensure that employees receive a basic standard of, at least like the minimum standard of living, to protect low-income earners. We have given examples, right? In other words, it prevents workers from being paid unreasonably low wages. Proponents of this policy, which is the minimum wage, argue that it reduces poverty and inequality, while critics warn of potential job losses. This is your unemployment, right? Which exacerbates unemployment. Job losses exacerbating unemployment. Right, so I think to answer this question, you need a diagram. From a theoretical perspective, let me zoom this. I think others were complaining about the size. I hope this is now clear in terms of this diagram. Right, so in terms of the theoretical implications of the national minimum wage, this diagram, I took it from directly as it is from Parkin et al. This is the textbook. Yeah, so this is the minimum wage fair. Right, so you can just read the what is it? No. Yeah, so this is where it is. Minimum wage, sorry, a labor market with a minimum wage. Right. So I will explain what is happening here. Okay, but let me explain through asking questions or by asking questions. Who demands labor and who supply you labor on the labor market? Remember, we have a market for everything, right? We have a market for labor, market for capital, market for goods and services that we consume on a daily basis. We have the market for currency, like the foreign exchange market. We have so many markets, right? So now we are concentrating on the labor market, where there is supply of labor and demand of labor. So now I'm asking you, who supplies labor and who demands labor?
Businesses would demand labor.
Right?
Individuals would supply labor. Individuals would also demand labor in the form of domestic workers and household assistants. So, yes.
Right. There's another hand up. Thank you so much. There's Lindy.
Oh, hi.
Yeah.
I think she said it mouthfully. I was gonna say that the same what she's explained. So
Oh.
the people are the ones that supply the labor in different forms, domestic worker, formal employment, and so forth. And the ones that demand the opposite, those that the employers, so to say.
Yes. Right. Thank you so much for that contribution. It's highly appreciated. So we said companies are the ones that demand labor for use in the production process to produce goods and services. Households are the ones who supply labor on the market. Right. So we have two forces here. We have the demand force and the supply force. Right. So when these two forces interact, like what we see here, when they meet, that's where we have an equilibrium. Why? Because the price at which or the price that remember, labor has got a price, right? What is the price of labor? What is the price of labor? Right. Remember, we talked about markets. We said that we have the goods markets, we have your labor market, capital markets, we have the money market or the foreign exchange market. So in all those markets, there are prices. Right? In the foreign exchange market, the exchange rate is the price of the currencies that you'll be trading there. In this market, which is the labor market, we have the wage. The wage is the price of labor. So I'm saying, here, the wage that the companies are willing to pay is exactly equivalent to the wage that individuals are willing to accept. So that creates an equilibrium. Right. But what happens now that the government wants to establish a national minimum wage? Because the government would look at the agricultural sector, for example, and say, oh no, let's say mining workers, agricultural workers, domestic workers, they are getting quite low wages. The equilibrium, let's say this $6, or let's say R6, 6 whatever, that they are getting, or the equilibrium, the equilibrium wage rate is quite low considering the cost of living, right? So let's institute a minimum wage that is above equilibrium that would allow these low paid workers to at least earn or have a decent life. So that's when the government institutes a minimum wage that is above equilibrium. You can't institute a minimum wage below equilibrium because it's not making sense. Already the equilibrium price that we are having, the equilibrium wage rate that we have is already low. So if you put a minimum wage below the equilibrium, you're not doing anything, right? So it has to be above the equilibrium so that workers now can earn at least a higher wage. But remember, when you are doing that, you are creating a disequilibrium in the market. Why? Because look at this wage rate that is now $7 per hour. At $7 per hour, how much labor are now are companies demanding now? Okay, how much labor companies? Okay, let me rephrase that. Now we have $7 per hour as our minimum wage. The word minimum, it means that you can start from here and pay even a higher wage, but you're not allowed to go below. That's why this is called the illegal region. If you are found paying an employee any wage that is below the minimum or the statutory minimum wage, then penalties might, you might face penalties, right? So I'm saying now, if this is the new wage rate, put in place by the government, companies now would demand 20 million hours of labor, hours of work, or hours of labor per year. Initially, before the minimum wage, the wage rate was 6 and 21 million hours of labor were demanded and supplied. But now you can see that at this higher wage rate, obviously, remember, companies are there to maximize profits, right? If the wage rate goes up, what do? They might cut on what? What do they cut on?
On the demand for the labor
Yes, they cut
hours.
on their demand for labor. Moving from points, let's say moving from 21 million to 20 million. But look at this. The opposite happens to the suppliers of labor. At this wage rate at $6, the suppliers of labor were willing to supply 21. But now at this higher wage rate, they are willing even to supply, is it more or less?
More.
More. So you see, now we have a disequilibrium already. Because the hours of labor that the households are willing to supply are greater than the hours of labor that are demanded by the companies. So the result is unemployment, because we go back to the definition of unemployment. What is unemployment? This is the total number of people who are actively seeking for a job but cannot find one. So if you are willing to work and able to do so, but you can't find a job, we consider you as unemployed. So in the definition, a narrow definition of unemployment, we don't include people who are discouraged. Those who are no longer actively seeking for a job, they are not considered to be unemployed, right? So this deviation or this disequilibrium or this gap that we have now creates surplus labor. So I can call this surplus what? Why is it surplus? Because what people are willing to supply on the market, right, is actually greater than what the companies are willing to buy. That creates unemployment. Remember, the question says, effect of the minimum wage on what? Unemployment. So we've touched already on one of the things. Theoretically, of course. All right. So the explanation that I presented here is just a reiteration of what I've already said. So this is from a classical economic view of minimum wages. So in the diagram above, remember we are looking at theory, what theory says. In the diagram above, the market equilibrium occurs where the labor demand D and labor supply intersects sorry, let me read that again. In the diagram above, let me put them the diagram so that you can see. In the diagram above, the market equilibrium wage occurs where the labor demand curve D intersects the labor supply curve S. This is where we are. At a lower wage level, for example, $5 per hour. So you can draw your own diagram, right? Or you can take one from the internet. You don't necessarily have to use this one. However, when the government imposes a minimum wage, for example, $7 per hour, it creates a wage floor, right? In economics, there are what we call price floors and price ceilings. So a ceiling, you know what a ceiling is, right? It is above your head. You can't go above that. That's a ceiling. Price floor, you can start from here going up. So here we have touched just one concept, which is the price floor. That's a minimum wage. A minimum wage is an example of a price floor. A price ceiling is considered a maximum price. And you should know this, right? Even with the exam, sometimes you might get a question. Oh, I don't know how I'm writing this. Maximum what? Maximum price, because you can't go above it. And maybe perhaps I may give you examples of when this is applicable. For example, if the government, it normally happens on basic commodities, like your bread, mealie meal.
Price
Those
of fuel,
come again?
like the price of fuel, because the government
Yeah.
says
Yeah, we can put legal maximum price to say you can't go above this, right? Because that product is an essential. It's not a luxury good. Anyway, that's a digression. We can have that conversation on another time. So, however, when the government imposes a minimum wage, e.g., it creates a wage floor above the equilibrium, meaning employers must pay at least this amount. At this higher wage, labor supply at point B exceeds labor demand at point A, resulting in unemployment, which is shown by the pink shaded region. You don't need really to show the colors and what. I was just showing you so that you understand, right? So the gap between A and B represents surplus labor, where more workers are willing to work at the higher wage, but fewer jobs are available because companies have reduced their demand for labor. So the gray shaded area, just for you to understand, right? Below the minimum wage is labeled as the illegal region, indicating that paying wages below the minimum wage is not permitted. The diagram visually explains why a binding minimum wage can lead to job losses, particularly affecting the low-skilled workers. Right, this is another view. You don't necessarily need to write it in this way, like the way I've put it to say the Keynesian view. Right? Because in economics, we have different schools of thought. We have the classical school of thought. We have the Keynesian school of thought. So those guys, I think they have different, I don't know if I can say conflicting views about economic theory. So the Keynesian approach now suggests that higher wages can boost aggregate demand, as workers have higher disposable incomes, leading to increased consumption and economic growth. This is according to those that subscribe to the Keynes school of thought. They would say at higher wages, remember now those who were previously low paid, now they have income and they have higher disposable income to spend. Remember spending, you remember that equation that I've given you, GDP is equals to what? Consumption plus investment plus government expenditure plus exports. Mind my writing. All right, so consumption, investment. So consumption is a very critical component of GDP, guys, in any economy. In South Africa, I'm sure consumption expenditure on its own, it contributes to over 60% of GDP. Just consumption only. So what forms consumption, or what components do we get in consumption? When you buy fuel, consumption. Electricity, that's consumption. When you travel, it's consumption. Whatever, like most of our activities are centered on private consumption, right? Then the government also comes in. When the government spends, when the government pays employees, when the government invests in infrastructure, that's GDP, right? It's a component of GDP. Okay, we'll do that in macroeconomics, where you understand this equation at greater detail. Right, so this perspective argues that minimum wages could have positive multiplier effects, which stimulates job creation rather than destroying jobs. So according to Keynes, higher minimum wages are beneficial for the economy. Why? Because it leads to higher disposable income. When people have more income, they spend on consumption, therefore creating or leading to economic growth. When we have growth, job creation instead of job destruction. And now we can extend, you can use this as your your foundation to now extend the argument and include issues to do with, here we've talked about unemployment, right? To say unemployment falls, according to this view. But now what happens to inequality? What happens to poverty and stuff like that? But I'm sure you can see the direction. If we are able to boost aggregate demand in the economy, it means that issues to do with poverty and perhaps unemployment, and inequality might be lowered as well. Right. This is also in line with the predictions of the efficient wealth theory. So my advice to you is to say, okay, you now go perhaps on Google to say efficient wage theory to find literature that talks about efficient wage, so that you understand, oh, so high wages are actually good for they're actually good in terms of promoting what? Okay, well, let me check. We have poverty, we have unemployment, we have inequality, right? Okay, so I'm trying just to link this efficient wage theory because it predicts that higher wages can also lead to increased worker productivity, right? When we have higher worker productivity, it means more output produced, right? Lower turnover. With high wages, there's lower turnover and reduced absenteeism. All of this which promotes output in the economy, right? With more output, higher GDP. With higher GDP, that's economic growth, right? With economic growth, obviously, we know that more and more people will also be employed. So can you see the different views from the classical view, Keynesian view? So from a theoretical perspective, you can now have a paragraph perhaps that talks about or that tries to bring the pieces together before you move on to empirical findings. Remember, there is a difference between theory and empirics. Theory, these are like, okay. Theory is not backed by, normally it's not backed by empirical findings. When you look at empirical findings, these are studies that has been done to prove whether that theory is true or it's not. So there are quite a lot of empirical studies that have been found. Examples that I've presented here might help you to actually, so you can beef up your solution by looking at empirical studies. So you can have a heading, or I don't know if you want, you prefer, you can have empirical findings or empirical evidence on this relationship, right? To say, of course, we've looked at this from a theoretical point of view. Right? So I don't know, somewhere in your introduction where you can introduce that the statement or that you can put the statement that says the relationship between these three variables, the triple, they call it the triple what? Triple challenges, right? Triple, I forgot the actual name. It's triple what? Oh, triple challenge, yeah, triple challenge. So I was saying, you can say the triple challenge of poverty, inequality, and unemployment can be viewed both from the theoretical perspective and also from the empirical perspective. And then you detail your theories, what they say, and then you go on to empirical findings. In South Africa, say, those studies that have been done in South Africa, what were the findings? There are quite a lot of studies that I've shown you. These are the first two. And then there is another one, the other two here. Let's check the first one. So this is evidence from China, right? You can include one study from abroad if you want. So the minimum wage has been regarded as an important element of public policy for reducing poverty and inequality. You see, increasing the minimum wage is supposed to raise earnings for millions of low-wage workers and therefore lower earnings inequality, right? However, there is no consensus in the existing literature from industrialized economies, countries regarding whether increasing the minimum wages helped lower earnings inequality. China has recently exhibited rapid economic growth and widening earnings inequality since China. So yeah, this is a study. You can actually download the full package and read and check what the findings were. But I think, let me check. We find that increasing the minimum wage reduces inequality by decreasing the earnings gap between the median and the bottom. So this can be a good example of a paper that you can, and can you see that in reading papers, you don't necessarily need to read the entire paper. You might be interested in the findings, okay? What the authors found. And in terms of referencing, I think let me highlight this, it's a very important. You can make use of Google Scholar. If you haven't done so, it's high time that you learn Google Scholar, right? It's not difficult. You can say, you go to Google Scholar, right? Once you're in Google Scholar, you can now, all right, I've already taken my title. So you can just take the title. You can just take the title as it is. You go to Google Scholar, you paste it. You say search. You see, I have 2 articles. I'm sure it's just the same. It's just different journals or sites where it's published. So you can come here and say cite. And then you have different citations. I'm sure we are interested in Harvard. You just copy this, you paste in your Word document instead of doing it the manual way. So this is a very, one of the quickest ways of doing references. Another paper that we can look at, let's look at this, another good paper here. And this one is for South Africa, I'm sure. Oh, does increasing minimum wage reduce poverty in developing countries? So you look at what? Key findings, right? If job losses in the formal sector are small, raising the minimum wage is likely to reduce poverty. So this is what they found, key findings. If the informal sector wage raises when the minimum wage increases, higher minimum wages are likely to reduce poverty, right? So this is what they found. In look at the other things there. Let's look at the last paper, which is these interesting findings from, I think this one is for South Africa, I think. You can find 2, 3, 4 for South Africa. Oh, this one is not for South Africa. The impact of minimum wages on wages, work, and poverty. Okay, this is the abstract. So our findings, obviously, would say, according to, you take this, you plug it in your Google Scholar. I'm sure by now you know how to do in-text referencing, and let's say I'm interested in citing this. I will take that as my Harvard referencing, and then I put it there. Let me say these are my references. Okay, so I'll say references, and then I'll paste it there. Obviously, you can do this, and then let me get another one so that at least there are 2. Oh, this is the evidence from China, right? I will take that and I put it there. And remember, obviously, you need to order this in alphabetical order, right? So you can just highlight all of them. You come to sort. There's A to Z here. You say sort, okay. And then it will automatically sort your references. I included this, so R was put lastly, but I was not supposed to select the references, right? Just supposed to select the author, the names of the authors, and stuff like that. So now, if let's say I want to cite this as an in-text reference, how will I do it? How will I do it? I would say, okay, let's say according to, I paste my authors there, I put a bracket there, obviously the year should be in brackets, and then we don't put initials in text, right? We don't put initials in text. It will be like this, right? 3 authors, you name all of them the first time. The second time you name, you refer to them, you just say Alanis et al, right? Et al, it means and others. Right. If you choose to include this reference at the end of a sentence, then everything has to be in brackets, right? Like this. Remove this one. And this end has to be this ampersand. You know the ampersand? I don't know if I'm correctly pronouncing it. This one. So you see the difference between, this is the in-text citation, this is the reference list. Right. Do we have any questions at the moment before we close? Anyone with a question?
Hello, it's Peggy.
All right.
Can you
Right.
hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, thanks, Prof. I just wanted to check, is there anything wrong if you reference whichever way, whether you put them manually or you do it the long way where you go to reference and you put them individually? Do you get penalized for it or it doesn't matter?
Okay, I didn't get your question correctly. Like the manual way is, like for example, what I was doing, copying them and pasting them here, right?
No, when you literally go on Word and you click on referencing and then you put on new and then you see that the old way of doing it. Yeah, that way.
Oh,
That
okay,
way.
yeah. No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. As long as you have all the information that you need to input. How do you do it? It's been a long time using this system, but whichever way, yeah, whichever way it
Okay.
works. Yeah, it
No,
works.
it's fine. No, thank you.
It doesn't. It only depends on which one you find to be faster for you. Obviously, there are pros and cons for each of those, each of these. All right. If you don't have any further questions, I think we can conclude it here. Remember, I would repeat this again. This should not be like your and taking everything here that we have here word for word, right? Remember, I was preparing for the class. Some of the information I just copy and paste for the purpose of explanation, and so that you see the direction that you can take for this, right? I understand that even after attending this class, it doesn't mean that it should end there. You need to go now and use some of the concepts that you have learned here. Take what works for you, leave the rest if it doesn't work for you, right? So on Saturday, or I'm sure we're going to advise, we're going to be having another session for accounting as well, right? So if you're interested, you can also join, where we would just introduce the key concepts and highlights which might be helpful for you, especially if you haven't done accounting before. For some of you, I know you've done accounting so many times, so it might not be a problem for you, but for others, might be. So we also having classes for accounting as well. Our programs tailored to provide support, and please do not take the information that we have here as it is. Find your own way of putting that information across, right? I'm sure you know all those issues to do with plagiarism and everything. So I'm sure you don't want to find yourself in a very compromising situation. But I know, remember, there's no way, if we just use this as an idea or as a foundation, there is no way you can come up with the same assignment. Never. There's no way. All right, there's a question again from Michelle. And then you can unmute yourself. Or it was a mistake, I don't know. All right, so if we don't have any further, yes.
Just one question. But regarding the accounting class, when will that be?
We'll post on the group. We still need to determine the dates and day, but I'm sure perhaps over the weekend, because we have so many classes for MBA, MBL, PGD, and stuff like that. So this class, I'm sure I did a combination of different programs, but because the assignment, I'm sure is the same for those three programs. So, but okay, to answer your question, we are going to post on our groups when the accounting class is coming. And then we'll also discuss the details. If you'd want to be part of these classes going forward, share the information as well. But as of now, I hope you enjoyed the session. We are going to send the video. We are going to send this Word document with all those references. Please don't just use those references only. Use that as a foundation as well to explore even other studies that have been done that can help you to cement and strengthen your arguments, right? All right, it's already 9, it's past 9, so I don't want to keep you here for long, but join us again for accounting. We're going to be posting details on our WhatsApp groups. So thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy the night, and please do not endure these studies. I hope you are going to enjoy them as we go. So it's a bye for now. We'll meet again. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Prof.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.